Welcome and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Rausch. I am here to offer you tips and strategies and techniques to master your sales conversations. All right, here's a question for you. When is the last time you declined something and or said no to something only for it to turn into a huge drama that then you felt like you needed to justify your no or defend your decision? Have you ever had that happen to you? Well, this particular episode is here to share with you some ways to handle those situations so that you feel more resilient, but also to address this idea of when you're on the receiving end of getting a no, what are some ways to handle it so that you are able to maintain your poise and handle it professionally in a way that keeps the relationship intact. All right. So, we're going to be talking about different kind of ways to handle this and different types of responses. And there's lots of language suggestions here in this particular episode for you. And just to I always like to give some context of what prompted this particular episode. In the last week or so, I have had 2 instances where I have declined somebody's request for something only to have it be, like, kind of a shocking type of response from the other person. And so I just thought, maybe it's time for us to share this. This episode, of course, is never to shame or call anybody out, so I won't be giving too many specifics, but I will give you some ways to handle this, but also to think about this because, the thing about a no is that it's not up for negotiation unless sometimes you invite it. So you get to decide when you say no, where you're going to keep your boundaries. And the other thing is when you say no and somebody doesn't take it well, remember that your response is information, not a diagnosis of you being a bad person, you being somebody who doesn't make smart decisions. And you don't need for someone to agree with you in order for you to still have boundaries and for those boundaries to be very valid. Now, another reason this prompted this is I know that I tend to have some clients, and I fall into this as well, where you can sometimes find yourself in people pleasing mode. And those of us who have some people pleasing parts of our personality can sometimes accidentally teach people that pushing us works. Pushing back when we set a boundary works. So learning how to keep yourself from over explaining is important because over explaining sometimes feels like the polite thing to do. And yet it often opens it up for debate and negotiations. Um, and, remembering that how somebody takes your no is really more about them than you. And so again, put yourself in the position of being the person who might be getting a no and think about what are some resilient ways for you to respond so that you maintain your poise, you maintain your professionalism, and figure out if this is going to be like, what are you going to do next? All right. So there are 2 scenarios I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that came up in the last week and a half, maybe. The first one was somebody reached out and pitched me to have them come on my podcast and share about their new book. Now, the thing about this is I don't accept guest pitches. I have it stated on my website that I don't accept guest pitches, and yet I still get anywhere from 1 to 3 guest pitches, probably on average a day. Um, and it gets to be a little bit much and exhausting, especially when it's like It's right on the website. It says, I don't accept guest pitches. And I also understand that not everybody takes it upon themselves to look at the website, but that's not really my problem. That feels like theirs because it is stated. But with that, I send back a message that says, this podcast, I say, as stated on the website, this podcast does not accept guest pitches. And sometimes if I feel like this is just going to be like this is a company pitching, and so now I'm going to start getting all these pitches from them, which does happen. There are certain companies that will send like 20 pitches probably within a 2-day period for all their people that they're pitching. It's exhausting. And so I'll also say, please remove me from your list. And that's the message. I usually will put their name. Hi, so and so, unless they don't put my name in the message, and then I show that same kind of response back. But if they say hi, Nikki, then I'll say hi, whatever your name is. As stated on the website, this podcast does not accept guest pitches. Please remove me from your list. Now, the thing about this particular instance is I made a typo in my response to the person. And instead of coming back and saying like, asking, is this a typo, or asking, and it was, it kind of changed the context of it because I left off the word not in my response. So it says, as stated on the website, this podcast does, missing a word, accept guest pitches. Please remove me from your list. And instead of, getting it and or giving any kind of grace, this person sent back what was a pretty angry response. There was some name calling in it. There was a definite tone, commenting on how nasty I am. And I can't remember now exactly because I didn't want to read the exact message. So, but also choosing, to try to like make it an issue that I had a typo. Now, these kind of situations I take a few lessons from this. One, the thing about a typo is it's not a character flaw. It's a mistake. And I know some people are really like, oh my gosh, I need to point out that you made a mistake or you have a typo in something. And most of the time it's appreciated unless it's done in a condescending and or like judgy kind of way. Like, hey, in case this is helpful, you missed this word. That's one thing. But like, hey, I'm sure you didn't mean this, but you have this typo and it makes you look unprofessional, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. So it's not a character flaw and it's not an invitation to rip somebody apart, in my humble opinion, because it's a typo. So get over yourself. The other thing too is when somebody is sending back a message and taking their time to even respond to what is a cold outreach, whether you like their response, whether you want that to be the response, they don't owe you a response. Okay. So, in a sales situation, when you are cold outreaching to people and feeling frustrated that they're not responding, like, I get it. And you're not entitled to any kind of response. So, if you get one, and you feel like it has a tone, because the thing is who adds the tone to the message? The reader. The reader adds the tone. It's not like I sent it back in all caps and cursed at the person and or like actually said exactly like you got the exact message that I typed out except for with the typo. But like there is a level of like, okay, this is clearly a typo. So use some logic. Okay, good. And then the third thing is their response. The person who responds to getting a no is really a real signal because the typo didn't cause the reaction. The entitlement caused the reaction. This person feeling entitled to somehow, because they think they have a really amazing book, and maybe it is amazing. I don't know. I have no plans to read it. But even if it's like the best written book out there, they don't know me. I don't know them. Just like in your situations, right? Like if you're cold outreaching, people are not entitled. Like you don't have entitled to people's time or energy and or their response. And so it's really important that if you are going to do cold outreach, that there's some kind of level of uh, like realistic expectations, like be delighted if somebody responds, be ecstatic if you get a positive response, but getting no response and or getting a what you consider to be like a nasty response, even though I take real issue with a man sending a woman a message calling her nasty. Just think, would you have sent that same message if I hadn't been a female? I don't know. Maybe I'm adding some other stuff here too. But the kind of the real thing here is, what is a mature response to getting a decline from somebody that you have cold outreached? Like, here's one thing you could say is like, hey, thanks, so and so. Quick note, I think you meant does not accept, right? All good, removing you now. Like that's enough. That's enough to also point out that the person made a typo. Great. Pat yourself on the back. You caught a typo. But like acknowledge that. But sending back and name calling and, you know, talking about like how horrible this person is, like what does that do? The thing about response is if you can be precise, have some precision, and add some poise to it, it shows a level of maturity. It also shows a level of professionalism. And realistically, you never know where you might run into that person again and have an opportunity where maybe things could change. And I'm not saying it will, but it's okay to get a no, even if you don't like the way it's delivered. Like that's part of selling. And you got to put yourself in a position to be able to take it. So I think when you get a no, you can apply there's kind of three ways that you can take this. I'm going to give you some examples again. I think there's the professional way, like thanks for letting me know, or hey, totally understand, or just even removed would have been a professional response to getting a no from somebody, because it sends that message like, I'm being respectful, even if I don't like your message, like showing a level of respect. Now, a second kind of type of response that, you sometimes see this, and if you like this, you can decide if you want to add this, is you could have what is considered like a respectful kind of persuasion type of response. For instance, I know somebody sent this to me, that got this message of like, this podcast does not accept guest bitches. Please remove me from your list. And the person responded with like, never hurts to try. And in case you change your mind, I would love a chance to be on your podcast, right? That's like a little bit of that persuasion, doesn't change my decision, but you never know. So if you want to take that kind of approach, or hey, if you ever change your mind, would you consider me for blah blah blah? Like there's another type of response. Or would it be okay if I offered you, and then you could offer a suggestion? Or would it be okay if I offered a resource that might allow you to reconsider, right? Like that, you can decide whether or not you want to take that type of approach to getting a no. Um, the other thing is to just like, it's, you know, maybe you start to like create some wiggle room with this person, but maybe not, right? And that's okay because it's cold outreach. So having any expectations to cold outreach is just going to set yourself up for failure and disappointment. Um and then there's like the entitled, right? Responses. These are some of the ones that that I've received like, wow, okay. I guess that's how you're going to handle it. It's like, yeah. Or, can't we just hop on a quick call and talk about it? Like that is that entitled type of approach. Or, in this particular case, like there's no need to be nasty where it's like, okay, all right. But then when you escalate it into insults or sarcasm, like it's not doing anything for you or for your business. Now, I suspect if you're listening to my podcast, you probably wouldn't respond in this way, even if there's a part of you that sometimes wants to. But I want to bring it into the conversation because sometimes we slip, right? Like I am not always my best self. And sometimes I say things that, probably if I'd been more resilient, I would have said it differently, or I wouldn't have said anything at all, right? Like we all have those moments, but it is sending the message because how you respond to the no is really showing you and your character. It isn't showing the other person's. Like they're just giving you information. And and then how are you going to show up? So you get to decide obviously what you're going to pick, but being able to show up from a resilient place feels like a better thing to do. Now, the other thing too is you maybe have found yourself in a similar situation where you decline or you say no, and somebody comes back and pushes you, right? They push your buttons. Maybe they they insult you, or maybe they try that like the persuasion kind of response, the respectful persuasion type response. And it's important, I think, for you to then put yourself in these shoes and go, okay, so what am I going to say now? Um, and and there's some things to think about here. Like reasons, when you start giving reasons, it's like giving story. You may have heard me say this before in other contexts. Like I'm always explaining to my clients, like, we got to pull the story out of your email that you've written because story like this, reasons, right? It makes it negotiable. Decisions are not negotiable. So when somebody has made a decision, there needs to be a respect around that. Now, it doesn't mean you can't ask a question, doesn't mean you can't check in, but trying to change somebody's mind or trying to get them to justify it, it's really like saying to somebody like convince me. Like convince me, but none of us really want to be convinced. So they're not going to really take it anyway. So if you're the person who is declining and then somebody's coming back at you and now you feel like you're maybe in the people pleasing mode and or you're feeling like, "Oh, I need to explain this. I need to give my reasons." You are essentially like in convincer mode. And you may have heard me talk about this in sales. You never want to be in convincer mode because like people draw a line in the sand and there's nothing you can say or do that's going to get them to cross that line. So it's not like all of a sudden this person's going to be like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see why you feel that way." Like it's so rare that that happens. It's just I personally don't feel like it's worth it, and realistically, as soon as somebody crosses a boundary with me, 9.9 out of 10 times, they get nothing in return. They don't get any kind of response from me because I choose then to not open it up for any kind of negotiation. The decision that I sent was final, and that's it. And sometimes people will still try to engage, even when I like don't engage back, and they're still not going to get anything. But that's my choice. That's my boundary. And if that doesn't feel okay for you, then have some kind of a calm clear response. It could just be, thank you for reaching out. It could be, I'm going to pass. It could be wishing you the best. Like there's like, that's it. There doesn't need to be more than that. I find a lot of times my clients are, like, oh no, I need to have something to say. It's like, okay, we'll give you something, but these really clear, short little statements. And don't be afraid of saying, please don't contact me again when they have crossed the boundaries. That's okay. People showing up in your email when you did not give them your email address, you did not sign up for something, you did not opt in for it, and they're cold outreaching you don't owe that person anything. And for them to expect anything is kind of ridiculous, right? So you want to decide again, like how are you going to respond and be ready. Okay. Here is the second situation that came up, and I could feel this person wanting to pull me in. And I was trying to decide, like, how much was I going to engage in this particular situation? So this was somebody who reached out to me with a message that did kind of create some curiosity. So it said, hey, I've been looking, I can't remember exactly again, because I'm not trying to like call anybody out. And one of the last messages or one of the last podcasts that I did where I actually read somebody's message, I cannot tell you how many people reached out to me and they're like, I got that exact message. I know who sent that to you, Nikki. I was like, okay. So I'm trying to be a little bit more vague in this because again, it's not about shaming people. For me, it's a learning opportunity. And hopefully for you, it's a listening opportunity for you to decide what are you going to take away from it. Okay, so in this particular one, somebody reached out, they created a little curiosity. They stated something that they had noticed about my business and asked if I would be open to a conversation about a collaboration that they had in mind. So I responded. They said, let's book a call and gave me their calendar link. Now again, this is a cold outreach, so I don't know this person. So my response to them was, please share a little bit more about what you had in mind for the collaboration, and then we can decide whether or not it makes sense to further the conversation. Because I'm not just getting on a random call with somebody. Like that's my boundary. I just don't do it. And so then they responded and shared about this. I'm going to put it in air quotes here, collaboration. Didn't feel very collaborative. Essentially, they were asking me to sell for them. They were asking me to give them contacts so they could sell their product, which then puts me in a role of being a salesperson for them because they wanted to then pay me for these contacts, these doors that I could open for them. So, if you listen to one of my recent episodes around like referral programs and why I don't think they work, one of the reasons is because when you try to make somebody your sales team, that isn't their role, it creates this like weird dynamic. So I just responded and said, thank you for sharing about this opportunity. This is not a good fit for me. So I'm going to respectfully decline furthering the conversation. To which they were like, wow, really? Can you give me some more information as to what is causing you to not want to have a conversation about this? So again, I was like, okay, interesting, like not really respecting boundaries. So then I just responded back and said, to me, a collaboration is something that helps grow both of our businesses. I'm not interested in being a salesperson for any other organization besides my own business. And therefore, this is not the right fit for me. To which they then asked for some additional information. And now I'm done. Like, I'm just done. It's so entitled to then expect me to continue to give more information. Like, I said no. You asked why I said no, and I gave you my reason, enough of a reason that's it. That's all you're getting. So then that person now becomes a blocked person. It's because I don't want to engage anymore. It feels like such an entitlement. And I can understand where sometimes people are like, but I just want more information to try to grow or to try to do this better, or to try to figure out how I can do this better. And there's nothing wrong with, again, asking the question as long as it's done in a respectful way. The wow probably was the like kicker for me of like, okay, the idea that you had to say wow to my response, which in some way feels aggressive. You could say passive aggressive, but I'm just going to say aggressive. It's essentially saying, like, I don't agree with your decision. So, again, entitled, it doesn't work to your favor. So, you want to think about in those particular situations, like, are you willing to engage further? And when you're the person who's asking for information, wanting additional insight as to why somebody's declining for you, make sure it's respectful, your response. Take out anything that could be possibly construed as insulting, passive aggressive, judgy, because it's just not going to get you the response that you're hoping for. And even if you wanted to say, thank you so much for sharing, is it okay to ask? That is it okay to ask is what's known as a softening phrase. Is it okay to ask? Is there any additional information you'd be willing to share just from a learning opportunity for me as I am looking to grow this side of my business, right? And then that person can decide whether or not they want to share, but the like, wow, you know, can you say more kind of response? It's just not, it just doesn't build any rapport. And everything that I teach is built on the foundation of rapport. But the thing about rapport, and again, this might be for me, and you can decide if this is for you or not, but rapport and relationship, that is important to me when rapport is important to me when the relationship is important to me. But having rapport with somebody that I'm not interested in having any type of further interaction with, and it's not that I want for people to walk around and call me nasty and rude, but I'm also okay if that's their response to me giving what I consider to be a legitimate no. If that makes me nasty and that makes me rude and all the other things this person, wants to say, like that says more about them than it does about the person who is declining. So, I know I said this recently when I talk about creating curiosity, I always think about in my dentist office, there was this big poster that said, you don't have to brush all your teeth, only the ones you want to keep. And I say about creating curiosity, like you don't have to create curiosity with everyone, only people who you think you might be interested in working with or building a relationship with. And I'll also say that about rapport. Like you don't have to create rapport with every single person you come into contact with, only people that you're interested in furthering that relationship with. And if you're not interested in furthering that relationship, that doesn't mean that you have an excuse to be rude or that you should rip somebody apart. I don't mean that, but you don't owe that person anything either. And they're not entitled to your reasons, to your justifications, to your story. They're not entitled. So stop giving it to them. Like, stop rewarding bad behavior. Okay. All right. So here's how I'm going to wrap this up is when somebody respects your no, to me, that is like a green flag. And when somebody argues with your no, that is a red flag. So when you think about this idea of how you are showing up, are you showing up and showing people green flags? Are you showing up and showing people red flags? Because that will carry into other areas of your business and certainly into your life as well. So you get to decide, right? How are you going to respond? If you are doing cold outreach, even if it's not cold, even if it's warm outreach, right? Like nobody owes you anything. So being entitled and or sending a message that comes across entitled, it just does more to damage relationship and rapport, I think, than a lot of people even realize. It's kind of like, oh gosh, a podcaster I listen to, I'm trying to think of how he says this, is that he learned, I think he says he learned this lesson in his 30s, that there's a difference between being right and being effective. And I love that so much. This idea of, feeling like you need to put somebody in their place, to me, is this idea of I've got to be right. And being graceful when somebody declines, even if they don't decline it in the way that you want, is more about being effective. It's like, okay, so take that information and move that into how can you change your approach? How could you change your message? How could you change the way you would engage with that person in the first or the net, not that person, but the next person in a way that might create some curiosity, that might open a potential door for you. Like, take it as information and decide, like, I'm going to use this as a green flag moment instead of a red flag moment. All right. As always, thank you for listening. I am wishing you continued success. If you are ever in a position where you're not really sure how to handle a situation where somebody is pushing back, then you're welcome to reach out to me and ask for some feedback. And I would be happy to offer you a suggestion on how you might respond or not respond at all. Okay. Have a great rest of your day. Wishing you continued success.